Did you know there's a worm sitting in a lab freezer right now that belongs to a species science didn't even know existed until it woke itself up? Permafrost has a strange kind of honesty to it. It doesn't care how big or small something was, whether it was a predator or prey, whether it died in agony, or just quietly stopped. It freezes the moment exactly as it happened and hands it back, sometimes tens of thousands of years later, completely unchanged. Today we're counting down 10 of the most remarkable extinct animals Siberia's frozen ground has ever surrendered, starting with the smallest and building all the way up to a discovery that's still actively rewriting the history books. 10. The nematode. That wasn't supposed to be a new species. In permafrost samples pulled from deep along Siberia's Kolyma River, scientists extracted microscopic roundworms and dated the surrounding sediment to somewhere between 45,800 and 47,700 years old. When researchers thawed them out, they didn't just move, they started feeding and reproducing almost immediately, exactly as if no time had passed since the last mammoths and Neanderthals were still walking the same ground above them. Here's the part that stunned the research team. When they ran full genetic analysis, the worms didn't match any nematode species alive today. They belonged to something entirely new to science, later named Panagrolimus columaiensis, a species that had, in a very real sense, gone functionally extinct tens of thousands of years ago, and then unextinct itself the moment a lab thawed it out. It's one of the strangest technical loopholes in biology. A species can vanish completely from the surface world and still not be gone, simply paused, sitting in the frozen dark, waiting for someone to accidentally give it a second chance. The squirrels, the gulag prisoners found. An extinct species that revived itself. Number 9 takes the exact opposite approach, an animal frozen so violently mid-motion that its death looks almost staged. In 1946, in the permafrost along the Elga River in Yakutia, laborers digging deep into frozen ground uncovered something strange, packed into an underground nest. 3 fully mummified Arctic ground squirrels, buried more than 12 meters below the surface. They were in such remarkable condition that researchers noted they still smelled faintly damp the moment they were pulled free of the ice before drying out completely in open air. Scientists later determined the squirrels belonged to an extinct species entirely distinct from the ground squirrels living in that same region today and gave it its own scientific name. Radiocarbon dating placed the remains at somewhere around 30,000 years old, meaning these small animals had been sealed in total darkness since long before the last ice age even reached its coldest point. What makes this one genuinely strange isn't the squirrels themselves, it's what they left behind. Scientists studying similar frozen squirrel burrows in the same region later discovered entire buried seed caches inside them, plant material so well preserved that researchers eventually managed to grow living flowers directly from tissue the squirrels had stored away tens of thousands of years earlier. An extinct animal, in other words, that accidentally created the world's oldest working seed vault, just by doing what squirrels have always done. 8. The wolf whose necropsy rewrote the textbook, a pantry that outlasted its owner by 30,000 years. Number 8 isn't about a small animal at all. It's about a wolf autopsy that gave scientists their first real look at an Ice Age predator's insides. Near a riverbank in Yakutia in 2021, researchers recovered a fully complete adult wolf, the first full-grown Pleistocene wolf ever found anywhere with its body entirely intact rather than in fragments. Scientists estimated her age at over 44,000 years old. And unlike nearly every other wolf specimen ever recovered from the region, this one wasn't just bones or a severed head. It was an entire animal, muscle, organs, and all. A full scientific necropsy, essentially an animal autopsy, was performed on her body, the first time researchers had ever been able to examine the complete internal anatomy of an Ice Age wolf, rather than reconstructing it from skeletal guesswork. Scientists paid particularly close attention to ancient viral and bacterial material still present in her tissue, hoping to understand what diseases Ice Age predators carried and how those pathogens might have shaped their populations over time. What makes her discovery genuinely important isn't just her completeness, it's the timing. As permafrost across the region continues thawing and exposing older and older layers, she represents exactly the kind of specimen scientists worry they'll only get a handful more chances to study before the window closes for good. 7. Boris, the cub who wasn't related to his neighbor, an entire predator, finally studied whole. Number 7 takes a step back into deep, genuine mystery. 2 cave lion cubs found close enough to touch that turned out to be separated by an entire geological age. In 2017, a licensed tusk hunter searching along the Semyelyak River in Yakutia found a mummified cave lion cub, fur, organs, and skeleton largely intact. He was named Boris, and radiocarbon dating eventually placed his death at approximately 43,500 years ago, making him significantly older than almost any other cave lion specimen ever recovered. The following year, the same hunter returned to the exact same stretch of riverbank and found a second cub only about 50 feet away. Researchers assumed immediately that the 2 cubs must have been siblings from the same litter, buried together in the same collapsed den. Then the dating results came back, and the theory fell apart entirely. The second cub had died roughly 18,000 years after Boris, meaning the 2 animals, found close enough to have been born in the same nest, never once existed on the planet at the same time. Scientists now believe internal injuries suggest Boris was killed when the roof of his den collapsed, likely while his mother was out hunting. That same stretch of ground, it turns out, wasn't a single family tragedy. It was a den site reused by cave lions across an almost unimaginable span of time, with each collapse burying a completely different generation, tens of thousands of years apart, in almost the exact same spot. 6. The rhino with its horn still on. 2 cubs, 1 location, 18,000 years apart. Number 6 is a rhino whose horn survived intact when almost nothing else about frozen rhinos ever does. Along a Siberian riverbank, gold miners searching frozen ground uncovered the remains of a woolly rhinoceros in a condition researchers immediately flagged as exceptional. Most frozen rhino specimens recovered over the decades have been damaged, partial, or missing their most distinctive feature, the long, curved horn built from compressed keratin rather than bone, which tends to detach and disappear long before the rest of the body is ever found. This one still had it, fully attached, largely intact, and giving researchers one of the clearest physical examples yet of exactly how the horn was structurally anchored to a living rhino's skull. Because keratin doesn't fossilize or preserve the way bone does, complete horns like this one are disproportionately rare compared to almost every other body part scientists typically recover. What makes specimens like this valuable goes beyond the horn itself. Soft tissue combined with an intact horn lets researchers finally study how the animal used it in life, whether for foraging through snow, defense, or display, rather than relying purely on horn fragments found separately from any skeleton at all, a feature that almost never survives fully intact. 5. The kitten with the wrong-colored fur. Number 5 brings us back to something with teeth and a face nobody had ever actually seen before this one turned up. Along a remote Siberian riverbank, researchers recovered the mummified body of a 3-week-old saber-toothed cat cub, fur, skin, and limbs still attached, one of the only soft tissue specimens of its kind ever found anywhere on the planet. For more than a century, every artistic reconstruction of this predator had been built entirely on guesswork, drawn from bones and teeth alone. The cub's actual fur turned out to be dark, almost chocolate brown, nothing like the sandy, lion-toned coats that had appeared in decades of paleo art. Its proportions were different too: a thicker neck, denser limbs, and a face researchers described as barely recognizable as feline at first glance, closer in shape to a small bear cub than to any modern cat. The unsettling part is how confidently wrong the scientific consensus had been for so long. An entire visual identity for one of the Ice Age's most iconic predators turned out to be built on nothing but assumption. And it took one frozen 3-week-old cub to quietly prove that every museum diorama and textbook illustration had been guessing at the wrong animal the whole time. Or the foal with blood that still moved, a predator that looked nothing like anyone assumed. Number 4 is a horse whose insides still hadn't fully stopped behaving like a living animal's. Deep inside the Batagaika crater, a massive and unstable permafrost sinkhole so large that locals nickname it the gateway to the underworld, researchers uncovered the body of a newborn foal belonging to an extinct species of Ice Age horse. She had died an estimated 42,000 years ago, only days after birth, and her fur, hooves, and tail were all essentially untouched by decay. Then researchers opened her chest cavity and found liquid blood still inside her heart vessels. Not frozen solid, not crumbled to dust, the way ancient tissue almost always does, but still dark and fluid enough to be extracted directly from her body, over 42,000 years after she stopped breathing. It remains one of only a handful of times in scientific history that actual liquid blood has ever been recovered from an animal this old. Scientists went on to extract living cell material from her muscle tissue, and it sparked a genuine, ongoing debate among researchers over whether her species could theoretically be cloned back into existence using her preserved cells as a genetic starting point. 3. The bison that ignored its own extinction. Blood that never fully stopped being blood. Number 3 is where the mystery shifts from biology to timeline. An animal that appears to have been alive thousands of years after its species was supposed to be gone. Deep in Siberian permafrost, researchers recovered the mummified remains of a steppe bison dated to roughly 9,000 years old, a specimen that sits in a genuinely strange gap in the fossil record. By that point in history, most of the giant Ice Age megafauna that once shared its ecosystem, the mammoths, the cave lions, the saber-toothed cats, had already gone extinct or were vanishing at speed across the same region. This bison, though, was somehow still out there, still alive, in an environment scientists had generally assumed was already transitioning away from the cold-adapted ecosystem these animals depended on to survive. Its preservation was remarkable for its relatively younger age, soft tissue and hide largely intact, giving researchers an unusually clear physical snapshot of an ecological holdout quietly surviving in a world that theoretically should have already changed underneath it. What troubles researchers most about specimens like this one is what it implies about every other extinction date scientists have confidently assigned to Ice Age species, dates that might, in some cases, simply be wrong by thousands of years, based on nothing more than where and when someone happened to find a body. 2. The trunk with no owner. An animal that outlived its own supposed extinction. Number 2 isn't about survival at all. It's about a piece of an animal that turned up completely on its own, with absolutely nothing else attached to it. In frozen ground in Yakutia, researchers came across something that made no immediate sense. A fully preserved woolly mammoth trunk, skin and muscle intact, with no head, no tusks, and no body located anywhere nearby. It was simply lying alone in the permafrost, completely disconnected from every other part of the animal it once belonged to. Scientists still aren't entirely certain how a piece this large ended up separated from its owner, with theories ranging from scavenger activity tearing it loose to a flood pulling it away from the rest of the carcass before the site fully froze solid. An elephant's trunk, and by extension a mammoth's, contains no bone at all, built instead from tens of thousands of individual interlocking muscles and having an actual specimen to dissect. Let researchers map exactly how it functioned as a gripping, breathing, drinking organ in a way no skeleton could ever demonstrate. Search teams combed the surrounding area for the rest of the animal. Nothing ever turned up. Complete mammoth skeletons are actually far more common in the fossil record than complete soft tissue, which makes this discovery backwards in the strangest possible way. Researchers usually have bones and are missing flesh, and here they had detailed, fully functional soft tissue attached to absolutely nothing at all. 1. The mammoth that started it all. A body part with no owner anywhere in the ground around it. Number 1 isn't missing anything. It's the animal whose discovery essentially created every other discovery on this entire list. In 1901, in the Colima River Basin, a hunter noticed a massive dark shape emerging from an eroding riverbank. It was an adult male woolly mammoth, and when a full scientific expedition finally reached the remote site, his flesh was still red, his stomach was still full, and wedged between his teeth were the exact plants he'd been chewing the moment he died, roughly 44,000 years earlier. Researchers reconstructed his death almost minute by minute. The ground beneath him had apparently given way near the edge of a ravine, and he fell hard enough to shatter his pelvis and several ribs, an injury severe enough that he likely couldn't have gotten back up even if the cold hadn't finished the job. He may have still been alive, pinned in place, when the surrounding earth and snow buried him completely. His discovery became the single event that kicked off nearly every serious permafrost expedition that followed. Every specimen on this list, the worms, the squirrels, the wolves, the lions, the mammoths, exists in the scientific record today largely because one frozen body in 1901 proved to researchers that Siberia's frozen ground wasn't just holding bones. It was holding entire, undisturbed moments, and it was willing to give them back. Subscribe if you want to see what the ice gives up next.